the one thing that's really cool, Josh, is when I started doing this work, people were like, "Oh, you're gonna go help guys quit porn." Cool, good luck. It was like a very kind of flippant encouragement, from my friends and my loved ones. And I was convinced that I could help people and I was determined. It didn't stop me. But what's really cool now is, you referenced Dr. Huberman, Dr. Jordan Peterson, and even just like actually even just fitness influencers online, they'll say, don't eat sugar, exercise 3 times a week, and stop watching porn. Like somehow like the world has kind of awakened to the harmful effects of pornography, which I'm
Amazing.
really, yeah, really excited about. It's really cool to
Yeah.
see. I think what's missing in a lot of people's understanding is how to actually get to the roots of porn addiction. And the reality is, and you said this earlier, I loved it. The reason that we watch pornography is rarely actually a sexual reason. Almost never.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with sex. It's not about your
Nope.
sexual needs. It's not about any of that. It's actually much more fundamental. And so for us, when we talk about the root issues, we'll try not to be too ethereal here. We've broken it down into three primary buckets. So the first is what we call emotional fitness. So when we're trying to help people, we're trying to help people build emotional fitness. When somebody lacks emotional fitness, it's that numbness. It's that inability to access the inner world, thoughts, feelings, everything that's going on within. And this is sort of like the gateway, because like if you ask somebody like, well, why did you watch pornography? You said you're trying to stop what happened today. A lot of the guys that we work with are like, oh, well, I was stressed or I was bored or, I was horny. I don't know. It just kind of hit me. It's like, no, no, no. There was stuff going on underneath. We need to access it. So
Yeah.
that's the first bucket. The second bucket is what we would call a transformation of the heart. And this is where people are working through traumas. It doesn't mean that you have like a sexual trauma history. Again, like for me, some of my traumas were just parent-child dynamics that existed growing up. And I grew up in a actually relatively stable and healthy home, but no one's perfect. There's always going to be those dynamics. And so when we're talking about transformation of the heart, we're talking about really working through different experiences in life that have ultimately contributed to the decisions you're making now. And then the third thing is shifting your identity. And this is shedding off the old beliefs. I'm so grateful for like an Alcoholics Anonymous or a 12 steps that have kind of paved the way for addiction coaching and addiction recovery.
Yeah.
There are some things I'm not a huge fan of, and I think they're fantastic and they do very good work. But one of their philosophies is, once an addict, always an addict. You introduce
Yes.
yourself, hi, I'm Josh, I'm an addict. We just can't subscribe to that ourselves because we believe so much in the shifting of an identity. Like if you believe you're an addict, then you will continue to stay addicted by faith because you believe that's what
Hmm.
you are. So
Hmm.
we really believe in that. And the way we know somebody has properly gone through it, we have a little saying, which is that you reach a place where you would rather be 100% your true self and rejected than 80% your true self and accepted. So what we're trying to instill in people is this radical boldness to be their true authentic selves and and almost unapologetically, not necessarily rudely. It's not permission to be a jerk, but it's just like you said earlier, being so comfortable in your skin that even if it did mean you'd be rejected, you'd be willing to risk it. And that to us, when you kind of embody that in community, a lot of the addiction research, I'll summarize most of the addiction research for you in one statement. This statement's from the British journalist Johan Hari. He had a viral TED talk about 10 years ago. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. So when you have a system that is helping people get to the roots, and these three buckets we've identified to be primarily where people need to change, and you embody that with community, you put like-minded men who are on the same mission, who are serious about getting their lives back on track. Some really cool things start to happen, and that's where you start to see the rewiring of the brain, like we talked about earlier. And I think to be maybe a little bit more direct about how do people survive in this world that's so hyper sexualized, how do people actually, stay stable and stay sane?
Yeah.
You have to know where your shortcomings are, where your weaknesses. So I mentioned earlier, I don't have social media on my phone. The reason for that is twofold. Number one, social media has become very sexualized. There was actually a time where it wasn't as bad, if I'm remembering correctly. But social media is often a middle ground for people that relapse. So what happens is they get triggered, they get a temptation, they get an urge, they get a thought, they see someone attractive, And that kind of gets into like a 1 out of 5. But often it's the dead scrolling on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok that elevates things from like a 2 to a 3 to a 4. And then the 5 is where it's like the engine, the dopamine engine is so revved that now it's like everything's on full blast and they're looking for pornography. They're looking for that next hit. So I think there's a part of it where it's like, yes, we want to desexualize and we want to make sure we're not getting too exposed. I'm all for that. I think the greater measure, the greater strength is actually trying to identify what are the things that rev the engine, so to speak, that put me in these precarious places. And I think
Mm.
that's real strength, actually. If you can say, oh, I'm not even going to take a step down that path because I know that once I take one step, it's easier to take 2 steps and then it's easier to take three. And before you know it, this thing spirals out of control. I'm just going to resist it altogether. I think that's where real power is. So it's not even just about resisting the things that are sexual. It's about managing yourself in such a way that you're only engaging with things that are going to benefit you and align with the priorities of your season and the goals that you have in your life.
But just like the seasons change, so do we. And then I'm sure you
Mhm.
can relate as a father, as you take on more responsibility, your
Yeah.
seasons change in ways that you never even imagined.
Yeah,
And
true.
some seasons might be massive sleep deprivation. I remember I was doing research on behavioral psychology when we interviewed Dr. Judd Brewer, who's a very famous neuroscientist. And he's been on the show a few times, actually. I remember he said something so profound. He said, when you're hungry, when you're angry, when you're lonely, or when you're tired,
Yeah.
HALT, the HALT acronym, which is talked about a lot in many different healing addiction communities. When we're tired, I think is a really big one because we
Yeah.
live in a world of overstimulation and really visual saturation. I
Yeah.
actually love that you don't have social. Shout out to Maggie and our team and Marquetta for running our entire social media online presence. Thank you, ladies, so
Same,
much for
man.
doing that because
Yeah, I got a
if we
team that
try
does it all for me.
if
Yeah.
we tried to do it on our own and respond to like these thousands of comments and respond to all the energy that's happening there in an authentic way, I don't know any limbic system that could
Yeah.
take that in and still be able to function. I
Yeah.
want to go back to something that you said, and it really hit me. You said the seasons. Sometimes, especially as entrepreneurs, or let's say intrapreneurs, somebody's listening, a man is here with us, or a woman is here with us, and they're driven, Satya, they're driven. They want to accomplish, they want to reach their goals. What happens is they get sold a bad story from
Mm.
unfortunately very wounded leaders that are leading from the light of the flashlight I talked about. I think what's being called forth is that we hold up a lantern because a lantern shines light on me and it shines light on you. Leaders hold lanterns. Leaders don't
Mm.
hold flashlights because leaders that hold
Mm.
flashlights can hide behind their flashlight. For the
Mm.
people that have been taught by those holding a flashlight, can you bring the lantern for us right now? Can you shine the light on your own story and on how that story can actually relate to somebody who's dealing with exactly what you dealt with yourself? I'll pose the question again.
Mm.
How did you talked about the neuroscience in a very beautiful way. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Click the link if you want to watch the full episode, and I will see you in the next video.